Greetings, welcome to Kingdom Cast. We're kind of back after a long break. I just uh, finished my academic term down back in my university. So we're kind of doing this remotely. Uh, Warren, you're kind of a new face. I don't think you've shown up in any of my episode. Why don't you introduce yourself before I introduce uh, this episode, what we're going to do in this episode?
All right, Ken. Name's Warren. Final Fantasy geek lover. Anything to do with Final Fantasy, I will be there.
Right.
Other than that, nothing really important to share.
Right. Uh, to be fair, when you said Final Fantasy Geek, you kind of only played like what, seven?
Sure. 7 crisis score,
Yeah,
15.
yeah, yeah. Crisis, Crisis Core, is enough to put you on the geek side. So don't worry about it. Um,
Yeah, literally, no one plays it.
yeah, but it's good. I got so basically we're friends back from the university where we kind of study together. I basically forced you to play 15. Just because
True.
yeah, you kind of were already playing it, but I basically just forced you to finish it in one
Yeah.
sitting. Yeah. But again, so this is in line with a series I've been doing on my podcast, which is basically um, kind of learning to dissect story or kind of dig deeper into storytelling, trying to see what makes a particular story arc, a particular archetype works in a story, why we gravitate to those kind of stories. And our case study for this episode is going to be Final Fantasy 15. Because I thought I mean, specifically the 15th installment of the game is pretty much on the nose. Just hardcore Bible Christianity for you. So I don't know. Let me ask you, Warren. What did you think when you first started playing the game? Like in general, even just as a story, as a game, how did it present itself?
Hmm. Honestly, kinda, it
Did it?
kinda felt like a coming of age story.
Right,
Starts with the father letting his son go and him moving around with the three compatriots.
right. It's quite immediately relatable in that sense. The way it kind of poses itself as a coming of age. Here's this guy about to get married, the main character. Um, and in some ways, we kind of see he starts off immature. So you just kind of expect, oh yeah, this is gonna be a guy who's gonna have to bear the responsibility of his father and stuff like that. Um, but yeah, even when I kind of basically what happened was the game went into some kind of development hell for like 10 plus years. So it was gonna be a versus 13, and then it became 15. So I kind of stopped paying attention with the game's development once Tetsuya Nomura stopped working on it. Uh, but I watched the movie. The movie was kind of my first exposure, King's Glaive, back into the story of FF15. And I was immediately like uh, drawn back in because of how I saw a lot of the Fabula Nova Crystallis element is still in. Right? The typical Final Fantasy DNA was still pretty rich in the game. And then I completely didn't expect the kind of shift, the way this quote unquote coming of age story was gonna play out. So um, another thing to point out, right, as we do the episode, I hope it becomes kind of a useful case study, regardless if we're consuming stories or we're writing them, making them, whatever. It's gonna be a good, I think, uh, example because I really do think they present the story really well, even though there's a lot of critics to the game with how they pace it. But I think there's a reason the developers kind of uh, tell the story in this particular way. We're not talking about the 20 media you have to consume to get the whole story, but in general, how the story is being posed. So why don't we get to some of the actual story points, right? We kind of begin with the lore. The lore generally starts the same, like any other Final Fantasy. You got the crystals. In this world, in this game, crystal kind of serves as the omniscient figure almost, right? Because it made the world. It basically gave power to a lot of the astrals, and the astrals are basically the summons in your average Final Fantasy game. You got Bahamut, Shiva, and all those. But in this game, they serve kind of like angels, um, higher celestial beings, but they're not necessarily omniscient in the way, typically a Christian God would otherwise be, right? They don't uh, control the way things play out and such a thing. Um, to kind of fast forward, we kind of recently watched the episode Arden. We get a quick backstory on the problem with the world. So, out of the Astrals, one of them was Ifrit. There's this whole Promethean kind of arc where Ifrit gives fire to mankind. Mankind builds the civilization called Solheim, but then Ifrit kind of turns against the humans. Um, so Bahamut, so there was a war in heaven kind of thing. Immediately, we kind of have a pretty similar story narrative there. There's a kind of falling out both on earth and in heaven. Bahamut has to slay Ifrit, and as Bahamut kills Ifrit, his body starts to kind of decompose, but it spews out this kind of particle, this kind of disease, which is called the Star Scourge. So I don't know about you, Warren. What did you think when you saw that particular scene? Uh, when Arden was being told the whole Ifrit, uh, basically the backstory behind the world that we're introduced into.
Mm. Honestly, don't think I had too much thought on it. It kind of felt like like you said, the Promethean kind of storyline.
Yeah,
It didn't feel Christian at that point, though.
right.
It was more,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's still in the realm of like Greek myth
right,
and whatnot. Yeah, which is fair. Um, but I think this is a good kind of segue point where even the a lot of the Greek myth does kind of dabble, or at least it quote unquote borrows from the Christian story as well, right? Because the thing that's being imparted usually is knowledge,
right,
a kind of knowledge. But suppose it, of course, in the Genesis account, the knowledge was something that was determinative. Man wants to decide what is good, what is bad. Um, and there are other accounts, apocryphal accounts, like in the Book of Enoch, where supposedly the humans do get this civilization building type of stuff. But even besides that, we have stories like Babel, where essentially man takes the thing that God has given them, but they instead decide to build their own name, try to, kind of reach for the sky, reach for the heavens from their own effort type of thing, and then they fell. So that I thought that was a really cool, um, at least allusion to even how the fall happens, because this is technically the fall motif, right? I don't know if you noticed
right.
that segment. Yeah, the fact that there is a rebellion in heaven, but it also affects the visible world.
There,
There's a kind of
yeah,
curse. Yeah. So I thought that was cool. I don't know. You had any more thoughts on that one?
not particularly,
Yeah,
not on that one.
that's fine. We can move on though because the story hasn't even happened yet at this point. We do immediately get the setup. So the world is in a state where there is a disease called star scourge, and what it does is if a person gets star scourge, they literally become a demon. That it is not a hard illusion at all. Ifrit being the kind of the way he's designed everything, his nickname is literally called the Infernian. Um, and then the analog. the effects essentially of his corpse, or let's say his decay, is quite literally something that infects people and turns them into demons. Um, there's a cool, uh, another cool part here. So we got the problem as usual with every story. Now you need the solution, right? This is kind of like when we did the Bible class. Hey, man undergoes fall. The story is supposed to propose a solution here now.
Right.
The solution we get is in the form of a promise. The promise, again, do you remember uh, how is it posed as, at least in the beginning part of episode Arden? It was Somnus and Arden, right? So immediately,
Right.
yeah, so immediately we get a line, uh, at least a particular two bloodlines. And you made the appropriate observation. This is uh, quite literally Genesis 25, right? The There are two seeds in your womb, but the prophecy from God is that the older will serve the younger. So so immediately that's a really cool aspect to draw into because
Right.
yeah, because how you may call it, uh, Arden being the older, we kind of already assume, oh, he's gonna get the blessing. He's the one who's gonna be kind of like the savior figure, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, and yet what happens is Somnus trick the people, everyone essentially, because Arden wanted to get rid of the Star Scourge by absorbing it, which Somnus thinks is implausible. It's impossible to do.
Right.
Somnus is happy just killing everything. So he's a bit of a psychopath as well. Yeah, he doesn't care about like the cost uh, of purging Star Scourge, right? So and that's a cool thing because in the Bible as well, you're never getting this kind of like easy one to one. Hey, here's the bad guy, here's the good guy. Jacob,
Right.
yeah, Jacob had to resort to trickery to get
Right.
the
Yeah.
birthright. He has to lie to his father Isaac, who already has blurry vision and everything. So I thought that was really cool. Immediately, Jacob and Esau kind of illusion. The younger brother betrays the older brother, uh, and eventually, because Arden took on the Star Scourge to his own body, he actually gets rejected from the blessing. So it kind of became a self fulfilling prophecy thing. Um,
Right.
he got rejected. Uh, but before that, I want to mention a couple of the uh, promises, kind of the prophecies. And this is another cool aspect in the game. The game utilizes prophecies, right? The fact that uh, they utilize predictions and unfolding certain things, which I think in storytelling, prophecies do well in that they can set up an expectation while still being able to subvert it. Because it's in a way where, even in biblical prophecy, we don't really get the full picture. And because we don't get the full picture, God kind of puts enough twist in the whole story to kind of make the reveal just that much more special, at least after the fact, right? Um,
Right.
let me read. This is one of the example prophecy. It says, "In a time unknown, only a prophecy keeps hope alive in people's hearts. When darkness veils the world, the King of Light shall come." And this kind of appears as the first line. If you click start on the game, this is like the first line that shows up to you. And it shows up alongside the Genesis painting, interestingly enough, which is supposedly also prophetic in that it's gonna convey what's gonna happen. And so this is a really cool motif. I want to ask you, uh, do you immediately find any biblical connection when you get this kind of prophecy? The when darkness veils the world, the King of Light shall come.
First thing that does come to mind is the Isaiah's prophecy
Yeah, yeah,
of
It's in
Uh-huh.
Isaiah 9, right? Uh,
Yeah.
and that's a cool motif. It's the part that gets quoted by uh, Mark, I believe, whereby the people who dwell in great darkness, which in this particular case was Zebulun and Naphtali, they see a great light, and that happens to be where Jesus begins his ministry.
Right.
Now, that's fine and all, but the motif that's cool is always the this idea that the salvation kind of comes at the darkest moment, right? Because it's kind of similar with Jesus' case. It's kind of 20, 2,000 years down the line of some really bad kings and some broken nations. Only then,
Right.
once you're kind of really down in the dumps, you start to get some kind of reverse, right? A kind of reversal to the actual problem. So it's almost like downhill up to that point. But yeah, I thought that was a really cool connection or a kind of, again, plot motif that the game utilizes. The game gives us straight, right? It's gonna be a couple of line down the blessed line, which in this case was already transferred from Arden to Somnus. So one of Somnus,
Yeah.
yeah. So one of Somnus's descendants um, are gonna become a chosen king. Uh, the prophecy calls him the true king. I think there is another one here that I listed. I'm trying to find it. Ah, and this one was given by Luna to Noctis himself. Actually, I think she was. We're supposed to believe that she was reading the cosmogony. It says to crown the king of light is the calling of the crystal. Only the true king, anointed by the crystal, can purge our star from its scourge. So, again, the this whole idea that there's gonna be a king, he's gonna be anointed. Again, a really specific word that's kind of used, anointed by the crystal, and he's the one who's gonna be essentially uh, given the role of purging the light, right? So that was again really cool. That's just the intro part. We're not even getting to any of the meat of the story yet. So
Sure.
we got the whole setup, we got the prophecy, we got what we're supposed to expect. I'm wondering before we move on, did you have any other thing that kind of pops into your head and remind you of any biblical motif?
And I can't say I do have anything right now.
Right, that's fine. We'll run across them. Um, we kind of move on then, right? The story kind of fast forwards, and we do get a kind of fulfillment of this darkness starting to veil, because Kingsglaive begins. Do you remember how Kingsglaive story kind of started out?
Already at war with whatchamacallit?
The Niflheim, right? So we
Line.
got
Yeah.
yeah, we got Lucis, which is the promised line, right? The blessed line. They're already at war, but in the movie, we're actually told Lucis is actually losing. Um,
Losing the war.
yeah, they're kind of the weaker side. They even had to draft this group called the Kingsglaive, and it's actually kind of like a refugee uh, army. It's not like an elite force or anything. It's only elite insofar as they can use the king's magic. So that was again really cool. Uh, Fast forwarding in the sense that they're soon to be under occupation. Actually, they already lost most of their land. Um, and we kind of have another interesting biblical motif in this particular part of the story. Um, Let me see. Oh, actually, before Kingsglaive, I kind of forgot the other half of the episode Arden. Do you want to go through the part where Arden actually tries to get revenge on Regis? Do you remember that segment? We literally just watched it
Oh,
earlier. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So
definitely.
yeah. So Arden realized he got betrayed. Right. He is immortal because of the Star Scourge. So he kind of lives on throughout the age. and we get to Regis. Regis kind of is the king right before Noctis, right before the Chosen King. So in a kind of revenge fashion, uh, he wants to kill Regis before the whole prophecy can even be fulfilled. But he gets stopped. He gets stopped by Bahamut, and he's told a couple of things. Do you remember?
He wasn't supposed to be the slayer of the kings.
Yeah. So Bahamut prevents him from like cheating the prophecy that way. We're told
Right.
what he's supposed to do.
He was told to spread the scourge
Yeah. So
across
so
the land.
mhm. He's told to. Uh, I think Arden used the word specifically. He becomes the scapegoat to
Right.
become a
The sacrifice
sacrificial.
of the lamb.
Yeah. So this is an interesting motif. It might not make too much sense in the sense of um, oh, but in the Bible, the Messiah figure is the one that's the sacrifice. But do you
Right.
remember? I remember you had to go through Leviticus not too long ago.
Right.
Do you remember Leviticus 15? What's the particular the way they had to do the Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement?
Use two goats.
Yeah, they take two goats. What happens to one of them?
Make a draw. Take one inside the temple, and one goes directly out in
Right.
the wilderness.
Yeah. So one of the goat gets imputed the sins of the people, and then that one becomes a scapegoat, gets released into the wilderness or Azazel or whatever the translation. So that one becomes an exile, a kind of again scapegoat type figure. What happens to the other one? Do you remember?
Yeah, the other one is used as a sacrifice.
Right.
Yeah.
And then its blood is the thing that is used to kind of purify the congregation, the temple, and all those things. So in this
Right.
sense, right, in this sense, we do get a biblical motif because now both Arden and the true king serves as a scapegoat
The
as well as
scapegoat.
a yeah as well as a propitiation, a kind of
Right.
sacrifice, but this one is for cleansing. Meanwhile, the other sacrifice is to essentially pile up guilt on itself. So again, super cool storytelling motif, right? Um,
Right.
just with how that's kind of presented. Um, I want to draw on some details of that particular episode. I have the quote from Bahamut here. It
Okay.
says, "To spread darkness throughout the world is thy true calling." So Bahamut's telling Arden his true purpose. Soon the true king will be born unto Lucis. Again, a kind of Isaiah, a kind of a son will be born unto you. In turn,
Right.
thou shalt be his sacrifice, limitless shadow that ushers in the light. When the true king awakens, summoning the powers of his forebear, he shall at last relieve thee of thy suffering. Then the line of Lucis shall come to an end, and revenge thou seekest shall finally be found. So, in Genesis 3, we get the prophecy that the seed of the woman is gonna crush the seed of the serpent.
Yeah, and
But
it
then,
bruises the heel.
yeah, that and then the serpent bruises its heel, and so there is a kind of mutual bruising that's gonna happen. But that's all that the serpent is gonna get in terms of quote unquote revenge that he
Revenge.
right that he wants to pursue. So I thought again another just straight up a one to one recalling of biblical narrative. Uh, and a cool thing happens. Do you remember what happens? We get an option in this part of the story. You get to resist fate or you get to submit. Do you remember what happened
Good.
when he resisted fate? If Arden resists,
Right, right, right. He gets the torture treatment.
right? But the torture is
Aaron.
the torture is really specific. The motive of it,
He
right?
gets bound and he gets stabbed
He
by stabbed with a spear
right on his side,
on the side.
yeah, which
Yeah.
is a and then his kind of like Staroscourge thing kind of gushes out. Um,
Right.
yeah, so that I just thought that was insanely well done. the spear to the side, and kind of like water-ish thing gushing out.
Yeah. So something really cool about that scene in particular was the submission part. Had Arjun say the words, "I shall rule in blood and darkness,"
Ah, yeah,
almost like polar opposite of blood and water.
yeah, yeah,
So it's kind of interesting. Yeah, that's what was gushing out of him.
yeah. That's a really cool. I didn't even pick that up because I almost thought that was just a edgy line from him. But that's
Uh,
a yeah, but that's a really good point. As in, for him, uh, blood and darkness in this sense. Uh, for us, blood should mean life, but for him, it's kind of death and darkness. Right? So he kind of serves as a direct parallel, which a lot of people obviously caught. It's not a rare story motif, I guess, to make your villain kind of like an antichrist figure. Um,
right.
but this one is basically a direct counter. Yeah, so I thought that was a cool observation. He gets stabbed, and then Hera, the oracle, says to him, "The gods who rule above and the men who reign below shall lend their strength to the King of Kings. And though mankind may not realize, everything in the world is preordained. Man exists solely by the grace of the gods and cannot live without." So really cool. Just uh, and that doesn't take away from again the final defeat because this is again not a rare. This is a pre-biblical motif that the defeat of the villain is kind of already solidified even before the story starts. So I thought that was
Yeah.
yeah, I thought that was really cool with the way they did it. A lot of people obviously didn't really they kind of make Bahamut the bad guy in the sense, but
Yeah.
uh, sad to say that kind of puts them on the side of the serpent, if anything. Then so yeah, I just thought that's funny.
Uh,
But okay, there's a cool thing I wanted to tackle with the King's Glaive story. Because
okay.
in King's Glaive, what happened was uh, a lot of people were not happy because essentially what happened was Lucius was willing to give Niflheim, the opposing nation, right, the right to have a good chunk of their land. They're gonna lose just a bunch of their land, and what ended up happening is a lot of the King's Glaive, a lot of the Regis, Regis's own soldiers, kind of betrayed them allowed the Empire to break through the Crystal's wall and basically ravage the whole city. And Regis was actually planning that to kind of happen. He was willing to sacrifice the land because ultimately his goal was to kind of let the Empire away from Noctis so that when we kind of start the game, right, as Noctis, we don't immediately get pestered by the Empire. Um,
Right.
I thought this was really interesting because this has an allusion specifically to kind of the situation in the early gospel account. Because in the early gospel account, uh, there's a lot of, you can kind of read a lot of political tension. A lot of people see the Messiah as a political figure, and they're banking a lot of the a lot of the Old Testament promise into a kind of like geographical fulfillment, right? This is Jerusalem, this is the promised land. We have to maintain it, but it's kind of uh, a shallow reminder because even though they are where they're supposed to be, they're under Roman occupation, which I think makes a lot of the first century Jews believe they're not fully living as they should in the promised land, free from slavery and all that. The response, again, I find is really cool because a good chunk of the group tries to make Jesus king, right? Make him a political leader, drive out the Romans. But of course, Jesus' entire ministry is basically showing, hey, the gospel of the kingdom is more than just winning Jerusalem over against Rome, right? Uh, and Kingsglaive kind of shows the dichotomy. because a lot of the traitors and a lot of the people who sided with the Empire, with Niflheim, are exactly these kind of people who are like, oh, my loyalty is my home, right? It's about this land, my hometown, all these things. But Nyx, the main character for Kingsglaive, was like, no, he's fighting for something more. He's not, he even says, I'm not fighting for Lucis or Insomnia. Uh, he's fighting for the salvation of the world, quite literally, uh, for his king, his son, and all those kind of things. So the connection I kind of drew from this kind of plot was the vineyard workers, right? Because the king's glaive are close in relation to the king, right? If you remember the parables Jesus always gives, he sends wedding invitations. He has vineyard workers, and then he tells them, "Hey, I want to see the fruit. I want to see what you've been doing with my vineyard." But they haven't been doing good work. They have not been producing fruit. The father sends people. They kill him. The father sends his own son. They also kill him. And so eventually, uh, he has to either replace them or invite others into the kingdom, into the vineyard, and all those things. And the king's glaive kind of serve as that, right? They're the people who are close to the king. They're supposed to be kind of like the Pharisees and the Sadducees, right? Guardians to the law, guardians to God's kingdom, but they're unfaithful. They're the exact ones who are literally causing all the spiritual turmoil, a lot of the perversion of
Right.
God's law in first century Israel. So I thought that was really cool. So King's Glaive uh, tells that whole story, which I thought was cool. Uh, and then we have kind of the big main chunk of the main story. So the main story has Noctis going through this rites, essentially, right? He has to gather his ancestors' weapons, which can also contain their powers, as well as make covenants. Specifically, uses the word make covenants with a lot of the astral beings like Leviathan, Shiva. Uh, but we kind of are not told yet why. We're just told this is what will be necessary to rule. And of course, later down the line, uh, we realize, oh, Noctis is gonna have to, even with all this power, he still has to lay down his life. But before we get there, um, there's a particularly cool scene in the middle of the game. I remember I started watching you play the game at this segment, right? And that's when Noctis gets the blessing of Leviathan, but in doing so, he has to fight Leviathan at the same time. And he goes into
Right.
kind of like this Super Saiyan mode where he's just really strong, and we can only get to see this version of him twice. This kind of control scheme at the middle and at the end of the story, which again I told you this before. This is a really cool kind of plot motif. It's a revealing. It's a kind of glimpse at a future glory. And just funny enough, the soundtrack that plays in this part of the game is called Apocalypsis Noctis. Apocalypsis in Greek, it just means unveiling, right? Apokalypto means out of a veil. And so Noctis is being quote unquote revealed, his glory, quote unquote, his power. We're kind of getting a taste of it. And this happens as well for Jesus in the middle of the gospel narrative, right? Uh, if you remember, they went up the mount, uh, according to tradition, likely Mount Tabor, and he goes up to the Mount of Transfiguration, and he transfigures. Uh, his face shines like the sun, and then we see him talk with Elijah as well as Moses, and the disciples are kind of amazed, but Jesus tells them, "Hey, don't don't show anyone yet, don't tell anyone yet, because what they're getting is kind of like a an early taste, an early precursor to." what happens. And then at the end, of course, for the Bible in Revelation, Jesus finally gets revealed fully, right? His face shines like the sun in the book of Revelation. He wears the 12 stars, the seven stars on his back. So I just thought that's another really cool scene. I don't know about you. Did you pick that up, or was that at least uh, in your mind when you're playing through that scene?
Yeah, the scene itself, I kind of tried forcing baptism on it, but it didn't work right on the particular what fight. But then
Okay,
it always kind of curious. No, I was kind of curious to why it only happened twice in the game, right before, no, right after Luna's death
great.
and the end of the game itself. But nothing in between any of the middle boss fights. Nothing at all.
Yeah, yeah. So I think, yeah, the category I put it in is the fact that the power is unveiled in the middle. And again,
Right.
it's a kind of, I guess, a foreshadowing of a kind of full glory that you get. And the Bible does this quite often, right? Where it gives you a portion, it gives you the shadow of what you're supposed to expect. And I think, ontologically, the purpose is probably just to um, not make it so shocking or out of the left field when we do get the full glory. Um, but again, I think it still serves as a pretty good narrative punctuation point because a lot of the story arcs, a lot of the way people write stories do utilize this idea of foreshadowing in the sense of the character is shown to have uh, a certain kind of glory, a certain kind of power that's promised to him, right? In video games, maybe we kind of get a massive power spike. In certain other TV shows, the main character also becomes like really powerful, and we really just expect him to use the same power again at the end. So I thought that was really cool. But yeah, so we fast forward to near the end of the game. Uh, Noctis essentially is told finally what his purpose is. He has to get absorbed by the crystal, right? Arden doesn't want to fight him in his current state. He wants to have his full revenge, and that means he wants to fight Noctis fully as the champion of the crystal. And inside the crystal, as Noctis is uh, reflecting the light of the crystal, he is told by Bahamut kind of his purpose. Inside the crystal, we get to ask Bahamut certain questions, and Bahamut kind of gives a revelation, interestingly enough. You ask about your friends, or what's going to happen while I'm sleeping inside the crystal, what's going to happen to the people outside. And Bahamut says they stand against the darkness and abide in hope, sustained by faith unfaltering, that their king shall rise and bring deliverance. So it's pretty cool how as Noctis waits, the world kind of waits in expectation. So this is kind of a kind of advent type of thing, right? The people are told to wait patiently for the king's coming. Uh, and then we ask about what kind of power we're supposed to get to defeat Arden. And Bahamut explains finally, like in full detail. He says, a power greater than that even of the six, purifying all by the light of the crystal and the glaives of rulers past. Only at the throne can the chosen receive it, and only at the cost of his life, of a life, his own. The King of Kings will be granted power to banish the darkness, but the blood price must be paid. To cast out the usurper and usher in dawn's light will cost the life of the chosen. Many sacrifice all for the king, so must the king sacrifice himself for all. So this was really cool. I was wondering when we went through the sequence, what were kind of some of your first thoughts?
I found it funny that the usurper the usurper in question was the rightful king to
Right.
begin with,
Yeah.
but was being yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And here's an interesting thing: the fact that if we follow a lot of uh, church tradition with how we interpret the Luciferian figure, he is quote unquote technically firstborn of God in this sense, as in he was first, one of the first few created beings, uh, but he fell, and yet
Right.
now now he is consigned to a role of usurping because he used to be not now not anymore has any inheritance, so now he has to usurp, he has to take on or at least prevent mankind from attaining the role that he is supposed to, which is becoming images of God. So,
Right.
so I thought that was again really cool. Some of the really cool things with even terminology is uh, the fact that we're told the death is ritualistic, right? Because it's not the typical story where oh the villain is so strong, so the character has to give his life. Because in the
Right.
game we actually defeat Arden. Like
Right.
fighting Arden didn't take our life. And Bahamut specifically says he has to receive the power at the throne. So Noctis has to go somewhere and specifically die there. Kind of like how Jesus keep prophesying, hey, in this amount of time, the Son of Man has to be, gathered up by the rulers and then be crucified. Right? He specifies the kind of death he has to die, a crucifixion,
Right.
and it has to be in Jerusalem. He says the Son of Man will be given up in Jerusalem, all those kind of things. So I thought that was really cool. Uh, I put in the observation that uh, Noctis dies on the throne, and in Hebrews, I think it's Hebrews 4:16. The author, which I think is Paul, conflates the cross as a throne of grace. So again, another really cool, I would say, naming convention with the way they kind of keep the imagery consistent, right? Um,
Right.
usually some games they'll use the terminology, but it's kind of all over the place because they just want to use the symbol. But with this game, their terminology is kind of on point with how they relate a lot of things. So I thought that was cool. Um, after that, um, we're kind of Noctis is set to absorb the power in the crystal, which apparently is 10 years. So we get a time skip. 10 years pass by, and there's a lot of really cool motif that happens because we're told the Star Scourge on top of infecting people. Apparently, what it does is it also clouds the atmosphere, and so by the time we wake up, there is no more daytime. Right. So that part of the prophecy, the world being veiled in darkness, that is fulfilled, and that again is a kind of spiritual motif we see in the Bible as well, where essentially by the time of the first century, the world is dark. The the spiritual tension and all that. What's funny is in the Bible, you don't see anyone ever demon possessed in the Old Testament. But then,
Yeah. True.
yeah, but then we get to the gospel account, and every 2 pages or so, you definitely will have someone possessed. So, and I thought it reflected quite perfectly in the game because in the game, once you get to the kind of end game, you're going through all these places which you used to walk freely in, and now it's all like high level demons running around.
Right.
Yeah, I thought that was really cool. Um, but yeah, so it it serves that purpose, a kind of like Jonah arc. He is swallowed by the crystal. He kind of has to prepare himself for the duty he has to undertake. Right, Jonah was reluctant to preach to Nineveh, and in the same sense, Noctis is also kind of not ready to take on this whole mantle of being king, fighting against the dark. So I thought that was cool, and just so happened they both of them woke up at a coast near where they're supposed to go. So, um, so he reunites with a lot of his people, a lot of his friends, and they resolve to, okay, he knows what to do. He knows how to defeat Arden. Uh, and they all go. They go back to Insomnia because that's where the throne is, and that's where Noctis needs to gain the power to defeat Arden. Uh, Interesting thing happens. Do you remember what happens right before the entry into Insomnia?
We meet the broken Kingsglaive that have been fighting the scourge in
Right,
Noctis's sleep.
right. Um, we get a lot of the Kingsglaive who are kind of still alive, but they're weak, they're broken. Um, and we kind of talked about this a little bit. Do you remember what narrative episode in the Gospel this kind of alludes to?
The Palm Sunday.
Right. And
Right.
this happens to be a really cool thing because uh, we're like 2 weeks away. Yeah, we're about 1 week away from the Holy Week. So because notice the narrative structure, the Messiah figure has to go to the city where he's supposed to die.
Right.
The city is demon infested, just like Judea. And he is welcome. He is welcomed at least by that small group of people that believes in him, right? In Jerusalem, when Jesus enters, among a lot of those are the scribes and the Pharisees who are practically already dead set on killing Jesus. But among those few, there are a lot of the young ones who are saying, Hosanna, Son of David, Hosanna in the highest. So I thought, again, that was a really cool motif. Uh, the fact that the king is welcome when he re enters into his uh, quote unquote hometown in this case, but for Jesus' case, I guess you can say it's a kind of hometown, even though Jesus' hometown is Bethlehem, Nazareth.
Yeah.
But David, his palace would be in Jerusalem, right?
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Right. So technically, this is a kind of homecoming
Oh,
type of theme. Yeah. So and that's why homecoming is also quite a big theme in a lot of storytelling. But yeah, the the manner in which he returns is also cool because again, it's demon infested. It's not a good sight per se, because insomnia in this case is destroyed. And just so
right.
happens during the Holy Week, Jesus kind of cries a lot, right? He looks at the temple, he weeps. He enters the temple, he has to flip tables because a lot of people are using it for money changing and scamming the poor people. He goes out, he curses a fig tree, and so in a real kind of sense, the hometown, the place where the king is supposed to die, kind of becomes like ground zero warfare. It kind of becomes the place
Right.
where the most intense battle happens because all the religious leaders in Jesus' time were against him, confronts him in a bunch of ways. Uh, Same case for Insomnia, right? Because in the game, Insomnia basically becomes the final, most difficult area in the game.
Right.
Yeah, and just so happens there's like a really cool small snippet. If you do some of the side quests, which I know people didn't really like, because a lot of it is a bit fetch questy, but at least some of them had some good fights and good rewards. Uh, we met Kor, which is a side character, a pretty good one, but he says that Noctis is a spitting image of his father, which I thought was again really funny because uh, Colossians. I forgot if it was Colossians or another epistle, but we're told that the Son, Jesus Christ, is essentially the perfect image, the perfect exegete of the Father, right? The exact imprint of his likeness. So, and John says the same thing. If you have seen the Son, you have seen the Father. Jesus says, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. And that's kind of how John portrays Jesus as a spitting image of the Father. So the fact that Kor says that about Noctis is really cool. And he says that a small, he says one act of grace can save an entire race, which is almost like a parallel to how when the Pharisees were resolved to kill Jesus, Caiaphas stood up and he said, "It's good that one man dies for the good of the whole nation." Uh, yeah, so again, just really cool motifs here and there. And we kind of again get to the final part. The We already defeat Arden, but we know because Arden is immortal, we kind of need to beat him again in the astral realm, right?
Right.
Uh, and so Noctis is resolved. He knows what he has to do. He tells his friends to guard outside. This is really cool. This literally just popped into my head. Noctis kind of tells his friends to guard outside. His three friends, kind of like when Jesus
Mm-hmm.
enters Gethsemane. It's
Mm-hmm.
because he says,
Oh, right,
"Yeah,
right, right. Uh-huh.
stand and keep watch from me." Uh, and for this particular episode, Noctis says, "Walk tall, my friends." That was
Right.
yeah, that was a really cool again, small illusion. Uh, Noctis enters the throne room, and it's interesting because that's where he's supposed to die. We know. The way he dies is really interesting. He gets the power, he absorbs the power of his forebears, but the absorption kind of puts a lot of weight on him physically. He kind of grunts, he sways, his body becomes weak, and so we kind of get the physical anguish and the spiritual anguish.
Particularly striking. I think his father literally facing the opposite direction of him
Yeah,
during
yeah,
the sacrifices. Yeah.
that was really cool. Um, because in Psalm 22 it says, my God, why have you forsaken me?"
Right.
It's a kind of bereft of his father's gaze, you can say, bereft of his comfort and all those things. And so Jesus quotes that on the cross. He says, "My Lord, why have you forsaken me?" And it's not a sense of like, they actually lost connection. It's just it is the kind of spiritual anguish that he has to endure. And again, the cool thing is Noctis' final words alive was, "Trust in me," which is essentially asking him, "Hey, uh, for the father to kind of fulfill his calling, finish his role." And just so happened, Regis is the one who has to drive the sword into Noctis's body. Uh, and because for in the Christian theory of atonement, Jesus didn't die because of all the physical torture he went through. He he submits his spirit, right? He says to the Father, "To you I submit my spirit." Another quotation from the Psalms. So the Father takes away the life of the Son. The Father is the one that makes the Son a kind of recipient of his wrath, uh, and he dies because of it. So again, just super cool, straight on the nose kind of sacrificial thing. And of course, we get the whole final scene, which is not even a fight. It's just uh, Noctis defeating Arden. This was cool because I think this is directly in allusion to what in the Christian tradition we call the harrowing of hell. Uh, it's basically the time when Jesus descends into Sheol, which is cool. If you notice, after Noctis dies, where does he go? He kind of
In the crystal. Yeah.
it kind of looks like the astral realm, right? But you notice when he throws his sword, when he goes to the place, it's down.
Right.
So he goes down into Sheol, and we get passages like Colossians 2:15, Ephesians 4:9, um, 1 Peter 3:19, right? The passages that says, yeah, Christ went down during his death, preached to the spirits in prison, took gifts from men, and made a spectacle. He made an embarrassment of the spirits that were down in Sheol. So I thought the fact that Noctis goes down into Sheol, a kind of the motive of going down into hell and fighting him there, that was really cool. And then after he dies, he just kind of fades, and his words were literally, "It's finally over." Um, Jesus' final words on the cross alive was, "It is finished," to tell us die. So again, super cool. We kind of get a quick glimpse back to right before when they entered Insomnia. So it turned out they had like a final campfire type of thing. Uh,
Right.
yeah, and so that kind of completes our Holy Week motif because they basically had their Last Supper.
Right.
But the Last Supper serves as a different kind of motif for Noctis because in this one he's basically saying about how tough it is. Right? It was a pretty touching scene. He was crying about how he'll miss them and he doesn't think that he can make it and all those kind of things. So it serves
Yeah.
as the Garden of Gethsemane as well. The kind of sweating blood, take this cup away from me. So again, really cool stuff. And it's very interesting that they can do this for Noctis because rarely do you have characters who are like, man, I can't handle this. It's a bit too much,
Yeah.
right? Instead of the usual, oh, I got it, or maybe there are some type of rejection. Some story motifs do use a kind of reluctance from the main character to fulfill his duty.
Right.
But Noctis is strikingly similar to Jesus in that the the posture is it's almost too much. The sympathy is kind of in the fact that it's such an impossibly heavy burden. So again, I thought that was super cool. Uh, yeah, and then as you mentioned, the game ends pretty uniquely. It literally ends with a wedding. So I don't know when you first played when we kind of finished the game together. Uh,
Yeah.
did the wedding scene kind of took you by surprise, by shock, or did you kind of like saw it coming?
Yeah. It was kind of a shock because it kind of felt like there was no real explanation to why the wedding did come about. But when I did think about it a bit, it did connect well with Luna's death and Luna's return right before entering the throne room.
Ah, yeah. Hmm.
She comes, yeah, yeah, yeah. Her connection to Noctis doesn't really end at what do you call it?
Right. Yeah.
Altisha, right? Yeah. Right, right. So it kind of gave me the assumption that hey, maybe at the end of Noctis's sacrifice, he's going to be back in union with Luna. So
Yeah. Right.
yeah, kind of wasn't unexpected.
Yeah. Uh, for me, I thought it was. Uh, I think when I first experienced that scene, oddly enough, I felt like it was a bit out of left field. Uh, but
Really?
mainly because I straight up was not ready for Final Fantasy 2. Some of my favorite Final Fantasies are like 7, 8, and 10. And in all of them, the main romance, like the main romantic interests, are always separated by the end, or they're almost always like uh, irreconcilably separated again. Um,
Uh huh.
so I thought, oh, I guess they're both dead. Yeah,
Uh huh.
but the way 15 does it is really cool because suddenly we get a scene of um, the throne room, the same room. It still sustains all the damages from the fight. It has the big gaping hole on the side of it that's caused by Arden.
Right. Right.
But suddenly it's kind of like adorned with wedding bells. And remember,
Yeah.
the first scene, the throne was empty.
Yeah.
So I thought like, oh, was this kind of like a? I thought this was gonna be like a memorial, a kind of like after the world's restored, after light came back into the world because of Noctis' sacrifice, they gave him a kind of burial. And then suddenly they zoom out, and then Noctis and Luna was there, and it was straight up a wedding. I just thought it was insane. It was left field in the sense of for Final Fantasy stories that never happens. Yeah, sorry, small interruption there, but like I said, it's a bit out of left field for Final Fantasy games to kind of have their uh, romance actually end on a good note, at least the ones directed by Nomura. But again, in hindsight, uh, if you take the biblical account where, yes, the consummation kind of redemption, the kind of pinnacle of the redemption story is essentially a wedding. It's a marital consummation. So I thought again, that was super cool because a lot of people online, that is, I'm kind of seeing a lot of their review and a lot of the ways they dissect the story. They kind of thought, oh, this. They either say it's like an alternate universe kind of thing, or
Yeah, sure.
it's like a consolation for the player that yeah, I guess it does happen in the afterlife. But I guess
Right.
if you have the biblical framework, it's not absurd to assume uh, this is a resurrection, right? And they don't necessarily need to say it, but the fact that the castle still had the damages means that this is still the physical world. This is still a physical kind of marriage and resurrection. So
Kind of like with his holes in his hands.
yeah, it was a really cool. Someone brought that up. The fact that the damage, I guess the effects of the curse, right,
Right.
uh, gives a better, almost kind of exalt the whole scene because the castle actually looks much better with the sunlight blasting from
Right. True.
from the massive hole on the side of the. So I thought that was really cool. Again, and that's emblematic of in general, kind of like how the Christian story solves the problem of evil, because usually it's oh, why does God allow all these evil things to happen? And yet we know for a fact that if Adam never fell, then redemption through the Lord Jesus Christ will never be as sweet as we have it today, right? And so that even the fact that there's a big hole on the side of the wall to be emblematic of the effects of the final battle and how much it actually and the end of the story when everything's done and said, it actually complements the whole image. It actually creates a better picture. Yeah, that on that note, that's kind of the end of the story. We can kind of tackle other themes like those.
This is where it gets fun.
Right, yeah. Thematic themes where, like what you mentioned, the fact that the fall or the curse and all the bad things that happens actually complements the the good, all the sacrifice, all the redemption that comes after. And the game does a lot of really cool elements like that. Was there any specific one you want to tackle first? I'll let you choose this one.
I think we're gonna start with fire. Fire was pretty obvious, I guess.
Right. This is interesting. What did you think? So I think a lot of the instance where fire as the effect uh, is kind of used a lot in King's Glaive. It's used a lot in the main game as well, but I think it's like super obvious in King's Glaive. So, what did you think? What was particularly striking about the way they used fire as visual illusions? That is
I guess in the most striking one was the final scene. I guess Nyx's sacrifice. The fire took effect in the beginning, but only completely ended after the entire war. And
right,
like you mentioned before, the whole smoke and particles going in the sky thing.
right, yeah. So this is a really cool element. So Final Fantasy actually does this quite often. Uh, in fact, I'm playing like 16 recently, and 16 does something similar. And 16, however, it's purely bad because in 16 you have the dominance, the icons. If they use their blessing, if they use their magic too much, they actually become stone. So their parts of their skin becomes white and then they kind of stone out and they become withered. Uh, so it's actually a curse. It's a bad thing. Um, and that's mainly because in that game, uh, the blessing and all that is a facade from the bad guy. But in 15, fire is a bit more nuanced in its representation because we do see it in a bad sense, primarily with the ring, right? We got the ring of the
Right.
Luci, which conveys power, but later we learn apparently the previous kings they judge through the ring. Whoever wears
Right.
the ring, they kind of get judged. Um,
Exactly.
yeah, and this is really cool. So we kind of go back to things like Leviticus, right? You read Leviticus before. In
Right.
Leviticus, what does fire kind of represent? Uh,
That's presence in the temple, right?
right. Yep. Very good. So fire indicates presence, right? The fact that God is there, and specifically, if fire comes on the altar, it swallows the offering. That means
Right.
God accepts it.
Right.
And in fact, in a sense, every fire is an acceptance of offering, right? Because we're told um, evil nations, let's say you got a whole city that committed apostasy, what happens to them is they also get fire from heaven. They get burnt up. That's the
Right.
part of biblical law. And that serves more emblematic purpose in that the evil city becomes an offering to God. It kind of gets swallowed up and transformed into smoke. And so this whole
Right.
fire and smoke is all everywhere in Leviticus. Uh, and again, it's to teach Israel that fire transforms something physical and kind of translates it into the presence of God, right? And it could be
Right.
a bad way in the sense that it judges people; they're worthy to be judged in God's presence, or in a good way in that your prayers, your offerings, your sacrifice gets accepted.
It's accepted.
Yeah, which again, the game uses really well because we get one of the King's Glaive traitors, Luce, his name was. He wears the ring,
Right.
and obviously him being a traitor and the reason he wore the ring was because Luna was saying, "Oh, the ring contains power," and that immediately
Right.
it made his eyes like uh, glow white. Wears it, immediately dies, immediately becomes smoke. He immediately gets judged. And Ravus is the same. Ravus puts on the
Right.
ring, and he goes, "Oh, why don't you accept me?" And then his hand immediately catches fire.
Right.
Yeah, so that was really cool. But with Nyx kind of gets similar treatment because at the start the kings were like, "Oh, you're all. I guess you're the same as everyone else. You just want our power." He gets burned, but then we realize Nyx fully embodies what King Regis and Luna tries to tell him, which is, "Hey, you gotta fight for more than just insomnia." And so he says, "I don't care about insomnia, about this or that." He wants to fight for the future of anyone who can fight for it. And then the kings are like, "Okay, then you get it until dawn. You get to use our power until dawn, and that's it. After that, the cost is your life." So it's another sacrificial thing. And
Right.
Nyx doesn't go, "That's not fair." Uh,
Exactly.
he goes, "That's a hard bargain. Where do I sign?" Um, yeah, I think that's another really cool thing. The way uh, I think a lot of the characters become really likable because of this one thing. It's not just that they died because of exigent circumstances, right? Because you can kill off characters, and sometimes it means a lot, sometimes it doesn't.
Right.
But what makes a lot of their death powerful and like actually character defining, not just cheap throwaway life, is the fact that they actually embrace it, or a better way to put it, they lay it down, right?
Right.
It's not like a, "Oh, I guess they were too strong and then I die." Usually those kind of deaths don't mean much, and a lot of people actually complain that, "Oh, this guy should have won or that guy should have won," and you get into all those debates. But when the character quite literally embraces his own death and treats it as a sacrificial thing, that really develops the character really well, I think. So yeah, I thought that was really cool, and the effect was as he keeps using his magic, his body kind of gets enveloped by the fire until the end. at the point where Nyx finally wins against the demons and Glauca, and his body kind of turns into ash, but it goes up to heaven. It kind of covers the whole city, which was like such a really cool scene. So I thought again that was really well done. Um, on the topic of
Mm-hmm.
sacrifice, uh, I guess we can also mention uniform, although it's quite a short one.
Oh,
Yeah, obviously on top of the fact that they all are pretty well designed in terms of like their uniform. They look really cool. Um,
yeah.
yeah, but it's not like a throwaway thing because I guess the uniform color motif also indicates this sacrificial thing. The fact that the characters that wear black are immediately, in terms of plot wise, are given this role of giving your life, right? And here's a really cool thing with a book like Leviticus in the Bible. We get a lot of the imagery. We get this temple, you get this role, you wear this tunic, you wear this garb, the priest has to wear a certain kind of thing. And what it does, it's supposed to teach them their role, what they're supposed to do, how the universe functions, and all these things. And Final Fantasy 15 does the same thing in that the garbs they wear, the fact that they're wearing black, and in this universe that indicates they must lay down their life. And a lot of them that do wear black do end up giving their life, but they give, like I said, they give it. It's not like they die from exigent circumstance. So
Right.
I thought, yeah, that was really cool. Was there anything else on costumes or like uniforms that you wanted to bring up that was particularly striking?
It was kind of interesting that Luna didn't have a particular uniform during the playing of the game.
Right. And I think Luna, yeah, sadly, Luna only has an interestingly enough, like an oracle kind of outfit in one of the
Right.
box art of the game. And someone pointed out how it's basically kind of like a bishop garment, kind of like a pope-ish garment.
Right.
But that kind of points to Luna as a certain type of character. I'm talking archetypically, so maybe we can tackle that uh, after this one. I got reminded of the one thing I wanted to bring up, which is also the costume in the game, at least, also conveys maturity in one particular scene, because the majority of the game, at least if you played it on release, you're only wearing like one type of clothing up until the
Right.
end. Because right at the end, when Noctis is finally accepting his role as not just king, but also someone who has to die, give his life, he finally takes on his father's cloak. He finally puts on uh, his father's kingly arraignment, and I thought that was a really cool thing. In the Bible, you have the story of Elijah and Elisha, and the way Elijah actually picks Elisha to be his disciple is literally just took his robe and then gave it on him. And Elisha was even like, Master, please let me say goodbye to my parents first. So the the fact that clothing in this sense also conveys authority, maturity, taking on inheritance, all those kind of things. I thought that was really cool as well. But yeah, you wanted to mention, you wanted to bring up what kind of character Luna was.
Oh, right. It was interesting that Luna was kind of the symbol of the religion or the church itself.
Right.
But then she kind of didn't have any role to play with the sacrifice. And I guess that kind of builds into the distinction thing. The black sacrifice, the white.
I think if I can help you with the image on this one,
Mhm.
Luna's constant role throughout at least this particular story and what she serves for the people and even Noctis is actually a mediatorial role because it's cool that she always a lot of cutscenes we see her in she's praying, right? uh
Right.
in King's Glaive
Or
she's
healing.
praying, right? She's healing, and that's really cool. That's a good observation. She's healing, she's praying, She's praying to the gods for Noctis' safety, praying for the people. She prays to the Astaroths to accept Noctis, right, to make a covenant with him. Luna becomes a collective of the religion, quote unquote. And, and I guess if we say religion in an institutional kind of sense, maybe no. But I guess religion in the sense of a body of people. So yeah, Luna essentially becomes a church kind of archetype,
Right.
right? Because the church is supposed to pray for the world, pray to the sun, a lot of things. In Revelation, we're told that the church, Jerusalem, is supposed to be this thing that flows with water, that its leaves heal the nation, and Luna literally serves that role.
Right.
Luna also has a prophetic role in the sense that she's always seen reading the cosmogony with Gentiana and
Right.
whatnot, and she's kind of the one telling Noctis all the prophecies and whatnot. So much like the church, Luna is prophetic. She
Uh-huh.
conveys the word, at least the prophecies, the will of God, the word of God, to the world surrounding her. And even though her death is not sacrificial, her death is a result of, again, the intercession. Right, she gets in the way, and Arden kills her. So in a sense,
Right.
she partakes in the death of her eventual bridegroom. So so I think she fulfills the role of mediator, of church, of like a collective uh, body that is again the body of the head, which in this case is Noctis, right? I thought she embodies that really well. On that topic, I wanted to ask your opinion. This is kind of a side story thing. What did you
Okay.
think? What did you think about the romance between Noctis and Luna? The way the game presents it,
Honestly, it kind of didn't feel like typical romance. It
right?
kind of felt like a submission to calling.
Right. And I thought, I think you put it really well. Really well. Um, a lot of people. It's interesting, right? A lot of people really like Noctis and Luna as a romantic couple, uh, but their kind of feedback was, oh, they wish they saw more. They saw more of
Right.
the character working together or their dynamics on display. But I think this is a unique, not just valid. I think this is a really good kind of portrayal of romance. Um, we usually talk about showing, not telling. Sometimes,
Right.
uh, and sometimes romance gets a bit too indulgent in the showing, in the telling, where you think it's showing, but it's actually a kind of tell where you always put them in the same scenario. They're always talking and they're always making out, holding hands. Uh, but
Right.
that's kind of the author cheating his way into saying, "Oh, look at how much these two love each other." Um,
Right.
yeah, but that's kind of cheating. If anything, that's a bit too indulgent. Noctis and Luna gets very little screen time together, uh, at least without a lot of interruption. Right, whenever they are together, there's just a bunch of hell breaking loose. Um,
Right.
yeah, but I thought what's really cool was even in Kingsglaive, where we don't even see Noctis for a second, the romance was really good because all the romance was is about how Luna dedicates herself to Noctis being safe and able and ready to fulfill his mission. Right, the whole when Regis says, "Oh, please go to my son, please marry him. I want you two to be happy," and Luna is like, "But my duty is not to be happy. My duty is so that Noctis fulfills his." And you said it properly. The fact that in this case, love / romance is submission. It's obedience. It's whatever you want to call it, right? Uh, for the Christian, love is, as Paul says, love is God's law. It's not just arbitrarily, even though all those things are good, spending time together. showing physical
Right.
affection. This genuinely is the deeper article of love, in that she doesn't care about the baser things like companionship or affection. It's duty. It's the fact that she is willing and is waiting patiently to see Noctis come into maturity and take on his role. And what's really cool with this way of telling romance is it actually is the kind of it's kind of empowering for the female character, right? Because the really cool thing about Luna, especially in, like, say, the Kingsglaive movie, she definitely doesn't act like a side character whose only purpose is like a romantic interest. Because they're all like, Luna, go here. She's like, no. Luna, do this. No. She
Oh,
definitely, right. She acts with her own agency, her own authority. But it's
right.
all, yeah, but it's all because she's submitting to something greater than just what all the other characters are telling her to do. And that is the real empowerment. The not the fake kind, the facade kind, the girl boss.
Mary Sue.
Yeah, yeah. The I don't, we're confused as to why, but
Independent.
yeah, yeah, independent girl boss, which a lot of our media is fascinated with, right? They think that if a girl just has no love interest and does whatever the heck she wants, that's what will give empowerment. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
but in Luna's case, her submission to her duty and all those things makes her kind of like the most authoritative character in her own, having her own agency, her own gravity in the situations that she goes through. So again, small character kind of thing that I thought was really cool and narratively really well done conceptually, just because it follows biblical concept. Um, was there anything else? Any motif, maybe other narrative motif that was apparent in the game that kind of drew your attention, at least while playing?
Playing not so much, but uh this is kind of a thought I had right now
Hmm.
when you started talking about Kingsglaive. Regis's role in the entire thing kind of feels like he was acting as the preparer of the way, kind of the messenger. It kind of felt like a John character because he died in
Yeah,
the right. He died in the cathedral right before sending knocked out.
right,
It's kind of the way, yeah, Jesus only started moving around as much. No, he kind of fled the land when John died.
right. Yeah, yeah.
Not sure if I remember right.
No, yeah, yeah. You remember it correct when uh, Herod killed John the Baptist. Uh, Jesus began, well, he always had the rhetoric against Herod, uh, but then
Right.
Jesus, you know, had the movement throughout Samaria, eventually up to Judea. So I thought that's pretty on point, which is interesting. So King Regis obviously also serves as a father, right? The kind of
Right.
Abrahamic figure who has to reconcile with the giving of his son, knowing his son has the fate of becoming a sacrifice. Um, but yeah, uh, he's a character that you know he knows when his time is up, uh, and he doesn't shy away. When John the Baptist confronts Herod, he knows full well, that's he's gonna cost him his life. Um, and Regis essentially does the same, where I'll stay here, protect the way, so that Nyx and Luna can run away with the ring. Um, so I thought that was really cool. Another thing that impressed me is, again, another one of those naming convention,
Yeah.
where uh, a lot of people make fun of it because uh, the names are a bit on the nose, like Noctis, Lucis Calum. Lucis Calum
Oh,
literally means light of heaven. Um,
right.
and so the entire bloodline is literally called the light of heaven. But I mean, if we're being fair, biblical names are also always on the nose. Uh,
True.
Jesus is literally Yahweh will save Yeshua, right? So with that kind of naming convention is always cool. Luna specifically is cool because Luna literally means the moon, and so she reflects the sun, and
Right.
just so happens uh, in both the Bible and in Final Fantasy 15, the Messiah figure is equated with light and the sun, right? So Noctis is
I
the
see.
light. Yeah, this is really cool stuff. Noctis is the light of heaven. Luna reflects that light, as the church is supposed to, as the character that is supposed to mimic the light, and she reflects that light. Her light is incandescent, right? It's not from herself. It's a reflection of uh, whoever she's reflecting, the sun in this case. So, really cool stuff there, I think. Uh, and yeah, and I mean, I think there's a lot of naming convention even in between. The way they use a lot of the background lore. If you collect a lot of the game's collectible lore material, um, they're kind of notated as if they're like a Bible verse. So I thought that
Uh
was that was really funny. If you get a lot of the cosmogony notes, they're annotated
huh.
almost like a Bible.
Oh yeah. Uh huh.
So that was funny. And yeah, so overall, I think that's kind of all the themes, at least, that comes into my mind. Do you want to bring anything else? If not, I'll kind of bring this to a conclusion point.
Maybe not so much as a theme,
Hmm.
but it's kind of a theme. And back on the self sacrifice part,
Yeah,
I feel like the game kind of echoes that thing in almost every character we see, or at least every character that becomes good. There's always a cost of doing good. Every
right,
character that does good eventually either sacrifices something or dies in the end.
right,
We get Ravus does the same thing. Ignis does the same thing in his DLC and
right.
in the actual game. Not sure. Oh, what's it called again? Gladio does the exact same thing. Noctis, of course. Regis does the same thing. Luna does the exact same. Just the whole, almost the whole cast does the same thing.
Right. Yeah. So I thought it was really cool. Basically, it's the take up your cross, right? The fact that as the king lays down his life, all the characters that are on the good spectrum, the way we identify the characters on the good spectrum is the amount by which they participate in the king's own sacrificial giving. So I thought, again, super cool. Um, it's not like a simple, oh, I guess I'm on the good side and it's all fine and dandy on the good side. Um, all of them participate in the sacrifice. The the usage of that the fact of sacrifice, the way sacrificial giving is what defines the good and the bad character. The bad character wants revenge, they want progress for themselves, they want power. The good characters are defined by their sacrificial giving, regardless of what will happen to them, all those kind of things. It's the you know whoever lays down his life for me will keep it, but whoever uh, wants to keep his life will lose it. So yeah, that's cool.
Okay.
Um,
I kind of draws the line between most of the fans. I think I can't imagine playing and watching the movies without getting completely frustrated that each of the good guys dies or loses something
right.
in in an effort to win against the bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, but I think that's the same feeling that biblical narrative gives
Right.
because Genesis is filled with characters dying off.
Yeah.
Not just dying off. This is a really important part. Dying off without ever really seeing the full promise. Right. Uh,
Right.
that's kind of a big motif in Genesis. They get all these promises but they keep dying before they get to see the promise. And what's cool is that specifically for New Testament theology, what does that culminate in? The culmination, of course, in the fact that we're assuming and expecting a resurrection, right? The fact that all these people are so willing to die, not actually achieving something immediate, at least. Why? Because they know that's not the end. That's not even the end
Right.
for them. And I thought, again, super cool. That's just an amazing way to write your characters to, uh, again, exemplify just biblical narrative motif in how you present the story and how you kind of tug your audience, right? Because rightly so, we're frustrated with death. Death is the kind of thing that prevents you from fulfilling your telos, your purpose. And the game, obviously, again, you kind of can't escape from the idea that there has to be a resurrection, because otherwise, you are right. A lot of these characters did die for nothing. Um,
Yes.
yeah, but again, that's also how the Bible portrays its story. You must believe in a resurrection. So yeah, really cool. Um,
Really cool.
I think I'll just end it with a, I don't know. I feel like giving it a rating is completely unnecessary because it's just kind of such a top scale for me. Um,
Uh,
I guess tell me, how would you compare the game now, or at least your enjoyment of it before we discussed all these like connection with biblical narrative compared to now that you are aware of a lot of it.
I kind of got more aware of it during the halfway mark when we started playing together.
Hmm.
And I guess that's why it really got interesting. So, yeah, I'd say I enjoy it way more right now. So, a lot of things don't feel as blurred as it used to. That's all I was going to say.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's good. And hopefully that kind of becomes an encouragement, right, for Christians that enjoyment actually increases when we start noticing, or at least becoming more literate with how the Bible tells its stories and how, as people, regardless Christian or not, we are drawn to these kind of stories. They're simply imprinted on us uh, on an ontological scale, even. So I thought that's good.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I thought that's gonna help with the way we digest stories, the way we teach them to our children and others. And in general, I think they'll make us more critical, more discerning of stories in the future because these kind of stories are what good media, good culture is generally going to be born off of. We can't consume shallow, surface level stuff and expect to attain higher culture. So yeah, I think that's just the end of it. I will kind of give a few endorsement on the description of this video. We watched a few, uh, I guess, thematic breakdowns, and I read like a bunch of essentially Christians who obviously noticed the same things we did. Where they're like, "Wait a minute, this is our Christian story. This is our story," and the fact that they really did it well. Uh, I'll probably give a link to a lot of those people because I appreciate their work just as much. Reading them and listening to them also share the biblical perspectives that they kind of gain, the biblical insights they get just from seeing how the game presents its narrative. Also encouraged me a lot, increased my enjoyment of just even Final Fantasy 15 itself and even the Bible as a whole. So it becomes kind of like a feedback loop, making me enjoy both that much better. So yeah, I'm gonna put a link down in the description for those people. And I guess that's the call for the Christians to stop watching Chosen and all a bunch of the junk we like to consume, which is odd because we like a lot of these things. And besides, I'm not even talking about the fact that I believe it's a second commandment violation, but
Mhm.
but they don't even present the story in a deeper way. It's like what we kept mentioning. the show and tell type of thing.
Right. More.
Yeah, the way the Bible gives a story, we need to do exegesis. In other words, we need to dig. The Bible doesn't spell it out ABC for us, right? When we read gospel narratives, even if we don't get an Old Testament quotation, we're supposed to constantly remember Old Testament images in our head as we read through them, right? When we were reading Mark together, I brought up all the things that I get reminded of from the Old Testament
Right.
just during the crucifixion segment, even though none of them is quoted. But that's because that's the kind of world we're supposed to live in. We're supposed to live in that biblical imagination and not just, expect for the story to just be laid out on us. And, hey, this is relating to that verse, this is relating to that passage. Um,
Yeah.
and so, I think it's good that even with our media consumption, with the way the stories we read, the games we play, the movies we watch, we should desire the same thing. The the fact that the story is something that takes work, that takes effort to enjoy, right? That when you first get it, it might be blurry, it might even be frustrating, but you trust that the author actually put enough work that when you dig, you actually enjoy the story that much more. I guess that's kind of it. You got any last few words, Warren?
Not really.
All
Play
right.
16 next.
All right. Yeah, yeah. We should do another episode on 16 because that's another good one. But okay.
Yeah.
I think I'll call that an episode. Hey, Warren. Hopefully you'll show up in more episodes in the future. And that's been Kingdom Cast. Signing off. See you guys.
See ya.